The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, and welcome to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today's special guest is me, and I'm going to be talking about going through emotional trauma and abuse and how that led to depression. And this story is something that I think is very important to be heard because I think a lot of people experience this sort of thing at some point or another in their lives. And if you're like me, you didn't even realize what you were going through at first. And so I want to share it so that people can learn from it and either not get themselves in the same situation or be able to get themselves out of a similar situation. First, let me go back to my childhood. I suffered depression a lot as a child and like a young child, and then again in my teenage years. And then I got over it and I got to a better place. And I think I was in a mentally sound place. And then I started dating this guy, which it started off in a bad way as well. It still kind of blows my mind. And I guess I should stop and think about it a little bit more, how I even got myself in that situation. But I had dated someone and we broke up just because we wanted very different things in life. And like I wanted kids and he never, ever did. And that was probably about it as far as our differences and things that we were never going to agree on that. So it was never going to work. Right. So we ended the relationship, but we were still good friends. And he actually kind of pushed me to date this guy that I'm about to talk about. And I'm going to fast forward to the end of the relationship. So when the relationship did end with this abusive guy, I said to my friend, I'm like, my friend slash ex-boyfriend, I said to him, how could you have let me date him? You knew he wasn't a good person. And he admitted that he knew that. And this is just, it's so strange and so wild to me, but he admitted that. And he said he did it because he felt like if I dated this abusive guy, my ex that I thought was a good person, he was going to no longer have feelings for me and he'd be able to move on and get over me. So I hope that story makes sense, that piece of it. It's crazy though. I remember telling people what he had said to me and they were like, what? That is crazy. It really is crazy. I don't understand it completely. I don't know if it was like, if you date this guy, I'm going to be over you because he's such a bad person that like I'll see you in a bad way now, or because they were friends, but also they were friends, but I thought, well, like you're telling me to date him, like you want me to. So I thought he thought highly of him and I thought highly of my ex. And so I thought he wouldn't push me in that direction. But anyway, let's get into the not so good relationship. And so we dated And it was a slow progression of abuse. It was mostly emotionally abusive. I was very sick at the time. I had Lyme disease and all these other things, and I mean, there were a lot of parts that hadn't been figured out with why I was experiencing all these symptoms. And he would say things to me like, "You can't break up with me. Nobody else would ever want to be with you. You're way too sick. No one can handle that." And then he would say just rude things like he'd tell me if I had better posture, I'd be way more attractive and just like crazy things like that. And then there was also this time, the only time that it was somewhat physically, and it's funny because I say it was somewhat physically abusive, and I feel like anybody else would probably be like, no, it was." And I feel like maybe I still am defending him. I'm not really sure. I tend to not be super quick to label somebody in a really bad light. Like, I don't want to do that. But here's what happened. He was an alcoholic. He drank too much, and he would actually be quite pleasant and great when he was sober. And when he would drink, he was not, like, ever. He was never nice. And so that had become a major problem, and we had some pretty wild fights when he would get drunk. One of them was very scary, actually. Uh, I was very scared. There was somebody else there in the room. We were in a hotel room, and I was trying to leave the room, but he was going crazy on me because I had found some things in his phone, some very, very inappropriate things in his phone. And so I was trying to leave the hotel and just go home. And the room was in my name under my credit card, and I didn't trust him. He was already trying to pee on the floor in the room. Like, he was just a mess. And so there was a friend of his that was there, and his friend was trying to calm him down, but he wasn't calming down. And eventually I convinced the friend to just put the room in his name. It's like, this is your friend. You trust him so much, then let's put it in your name, right? So the friend did come downstairs with me, and he put his name on the room instead of mine. So I was able to leave. So that was one situation where I don't even want to relive it, really. It was so bad, and it was so wild and out of control that I can't even tell you the exact things that were said or done, because I think my heart rate was so high from being so scared that I don't even have the greatest recall of it. I know it wasn't pretty. So we got back from that and we broke up. And then he convinced me that he understood that his drinking was a problem, and his drinking was the reason for all of our problems, essentially. And so then he agreed he was going to quit drinking and things would be better. I also have to note that his mom did tell me, "Don't forget, it takes two to tango," or something like that. And I'm looking at her like, yeah, maybe. Like, but no, like, I wasn't the one cheating. I wasn't the one sending inappropriate pictures and messages to the opposite gender. Like, that wasn't me. I wasn't drinking and saying crazy things. And but anyway, back to the story. So let's flash forward to this night where he was really, really drunk, and he'd been drinking a lot and wanted to leave my house because, again, we were fighting because he wasn't sober. And so then I told him he couldn't leave. I mean, as much as I didn't want him around, I also didn't want him drinking and driving, because no matter how much somebody bothers me, I don't want them dead. And it wasn't just him, right? Like, I didn't want him hurting himself, and I didn't want him hurting anybody else on the road. I felt a responsibility for that. And so I was trying to take the keys from him so that he could not leave. And I did get the keys, and that we were fighting on the stairs, and I got the keys from him. And then he was trying to yank them back from me and push me off of him so that I couldn't have the keys. And so he ended up pushing his hand onto me right here where my pacemaker is. And I eventually got the keys, and I got into my room and I locked the door. And I also did slip down the stairs. I went down like a couple steps, and I tried to tell myself that, like, he didn't hurt me. That was my fault. But, when you look back on it, it's like, yeah, I slipped down a couple stairs. I mean, did I slip or did I get pushed? Because I didn't just, it wouldn't have happened if I would have been alone, right? So whose fault was that? And I'm not trying to put blame on him or even myself right now. The point I'm trying to make is just the view that we can have sometimes when we're in the moment of something, or when we really care about somebody. We don't want to see things for how they really are or were. And in that situation, I didn't want to see him as abusive. I think it's such an extreme label to put on somebody, and I didn't want to do that. And I was in my bathroom crying because I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I know he just had his hand on my pacemaker and there was pressure. It wasn't like a full on shove, but it was like a him trying to hold me off, but also pushing on me and in that spot. And I'm thinking, did something break in my device? Am I going to start having some cardiac problems? I don't know. But if I go to the hospital, I'm going to have to explain to them why I'm here and why I think something's wrong, or that I need my pacemaker looked at. And I didn't go, and everything was fine. It wasn't broken. But looking back, it's just, the point is, I put myself in a situation where I put somebody before me. Like, I should have checked on myself, right? I should have maybe gone to the hospital or gone to the doctor even the next day. Like, I should have put me first, and I didn't. And that's something I really am passionate about right now, especially with this show and everything that I'm doing, is teaching people to start choosing you. You have to choose you, because no one else is going to do it for you. And so I go back to that night and I look at how I was choosing him. I was choosing to protect him. And that wasn't okay, because he wasn't protecting me at all. There was nothing he was doing for me. And so eventually I did start to choose me, but it took time, because what ended up happening was I stayed in that relationship, and it was event after event. And eventually I got to the point where I was severely depressed, and I couldn't understand why. I couldn't figure out, like, why am I feeling this way? I was feeling fine. Like, life seems good. I actually do like my job. Like, I had a good job. I liked it. And, I got this boyfriend and he says he loves me. So, everything should be great, is kind of what my head was telling me. And I was still feeling very depressed and feeling suicidal again, which I had felt before in my life. And I couldn't understand why that had come back. And so I ended up going online and finding this therapist, which I've shared this on some other podcasts and talked about it a lot, how I looked in my bank account and I looked at how much money I had, and I decided I am going to spend every dollar I have to save myself. And when I share that, I feel a little bit of emotion come up still, because it was that bad. It was truly that bad, that I had very much decided in my head that I am going to spend my every dollar on the best of the best resources for mental health. And if I cannot get better, I am going to choose to be done with life. And that was really where I was at. And so I did my research, and I dug and I dug, and I kept coming back to this same therapist. And so I finally started leaning into my intuition and thought, okay, there's a reason. Let me just give him a try. Because there was something about him where I wanted to go to him, but then I kind of didn't. And I think, looking back, that part of me that kind of didn't, kind of knew he was going to push me in places I had never been, and was scared to go. So I went to this therapist, and it honestly didn't take very long. It was, I think, probably like 3 to 4 weeks, and probably broke up with that guy after a month of therapy. And of course, he blamed the therapist, and it was the therapist's fault, and the therapist is getting all in my head and making him out to be bad. But there's funny things that came up too in therapy. The therapist would ask me, because I would talk about things that would irritate my boyfriend, and there were things about, like, touching him certain places, and not like, this isn't in a bad way, just certain things. And he was like, I'm pretty sure he's doing some injections. Like, why is he so sensitive if you, like, slap him on the rear? Or like, they're just, so it finally came to light that he was clearly using probably drugs and obviously alcohol, and I think doing some steroid injections, because when I look back on it, he was very muscular, but also like didn't really spend the time to be that muscular in the gym. He's probably gonna listen to this and be like, "That's not true," but I don't really care. That's what I believe, and it doesn't even matter. So fast forward to the relationship ending and me finally regaining my mental health. It came about that I regained my mental health because I realized that I was having all this negative self-talk because of the relationship that I was in. I realized that the way that he was talking to me was the same way that I was talking to myself. So him telling me I could be prettier if I did this, or, telling me nobody's going to date you because you're so sick. I just fed into that, and I'm like, "Oh, he's so right." And so I just kept like furthering that narrative in my head, which wasn't a positive one. It was very negative, and so much a downer. So it put me in a bad mental state. And then it essentially led to me being super depressed. But I can share another little scenario that happened when we were dating and I was in therapy. So I was in therapy, and I remember this because I wrote it down, because I wrote it down. I was like, I have got to take this to my therapist. Like, I I can't see how I'm wrong, because I always thought like I must be the problem. Like, I am so willing to be accountable for my problems and own up to the fact that like I am playing a part in this. And so we had this incident where this was after, I think, the hotel incident where he'd been drinking too much and then promised not to drink anymore, like at all. He promised not to drink at all. And so we were watching TV, and I got up to get some nuts. I remember, like, because I wrote everything down, and I got up, I wanted a snack, I was getting some nuts, and I get up and I say, "Would you like anything while I'm up?" And he's like, "Yeah, can you grab me a beer?" And I just looked at him and I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." I was like, "You're joking, right?" And then that just pissed him off so much. He like flew off the handle because I said that, and was mad that I would not see it as a joke or that I was judging him. And so looking back, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, how did I not see?" Like, I was part of the problem because I was staying there and I wasn't getting myself out, but dear Lord, I was not the one initiating all of these fights. And so, like, obviously I went to therapy and like shared this, and then he helped me to understand my part and his part. And my part was essentially that I wasn't opening my eyes and seeing what was really happening, and that I was staying in a relationship that was just on this path of repeat. It was just the same thing over and over. And so eventually, obviously, I did leave. And what I realized after leaving that relationship was how much we do play a part in our mental health. And yes, it comes from the outside sometimes, but then it goes to us and how we're interpreting the things that we're hearing and seeing on the outside. Because what I did was cognitive behavioral therapy, which, if you don't know, it's where you train your brain to see and view things differently. So, how I once viewed things, I had to see it a different way to gain that balance, because I was obviously seeing and believing everything that my ex was saying about me. And so it's like, okay, those thoughts are making you feel depressed. So let's take those away by making you see that that is not the reality. And obviously, I know, and I talk about it a lot, that our reality is whatever we make it, right? But if your reality is making you depressed, if your reality is making you sick, then your reality needs to become a different reality. So you have to figure out how you can change it. And so I talk about this a lot, obviously, because I talk about rewiring your brain, but it's all about changing your thought process and your thought patterns and your viewpoints. And literally any viewpoint that you have, you can choose. And that's the key: choose. You can choose to see it differently. So I hope that this episode was helpful for somebody out there, somebody in an abusive relationship or somebody that may get into one or may have been in one at some point, I hope that you can take something away from this and help yourself to get to a better place or never be in that place that I was in, because I don't want other people to get there, because I know that not everybody's going to get themselves out like I did. And I don't want that to happen. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want everyone to understand that you have to choose you. You have to, because nobody is going to get you out of your situation but you. So even if it's a therapist that helps you get out, it was you that initiated it. You have to be the initiator and you have to start all of the things. So whether it's phoning a friend to vent and get another viewpoint, whether it's going to a therapist, it has to be you. You have to make all those initial steps, and then you have to take on the things that you're meant to learn so that you can grow. If you like this episode or you want to listen to more, make sure you click and subscribe.